Today, we're going to flip the script on health. Instead of asking what you should add to your life, we're going to explore a, frankly, much more powerful question. What should you remove? This is all about eliminating chemical stressors.
You know, we're always told to add some new supplement or try the latest diet trend. But what if the real secret to long-term health isn't about adding it all, but about subtracting? What if there are substances out there that are so common, so normalized, that we don't even question their impact, even as they're placing this heavy burden on our bodies, day in and day out?
So, that brings us right to our first big idea, this concept of the invisible stressor. You can think of this as the antagonist of our story today. And yeah, it's pretty much hiding in plain sight.
So, what exactly is a chemical stressor? Well, it's a substance that might be totally normal in our social lives, but from a biological point of view, it's something foreign. It's something the body has to constantly fight against, creating this low-grade chronic burden that just quietly adds up over years, sometimes even decades.
And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory. The downstream effects of this are seen every single night in emergency rooms all over the country. Organ stress, chronic inflammation, massive metabolic issues, these things don't just pop up out of nowhere. They are almost always the end result of that quiet, cumulative damage we were just talking about.
You know, this all leads to a really critical and honestly a dangerous misconception that we absolutely need to dismantle. Let's jump into section 2. Common doesn't mean safe. Okay, so this slide really highlights a huge disconnect. On one hand, you have our common assumptions. Hey, if it's sold everywhere, it's got to be safe, right? Or, people have been having this for a long time, so it must be fine. But then you look at the medical reality, and it's a completely different story. Just because something's available doesn't mean it's safe. And a lot of these products, they're recent industrial inventions, not some kind of time-tested traditional food.
And here's really the heart of the problem. So many modern consumables, they're designed for profit, for shelf life and efficiency, not for our actual health. They're stripped down from their natural state, they're chemically altered, and then they're rebuilt with a bunch of artificial additives. And the most crucial point here is that our bodies, they don't recognize these compounds the same way they recognize real food.
All right, so let's get a little more specific. In this next section, we're going to look at the very real chemical burden that comes from two major sources you probably encounter every single day. Our first case study is something incredibly common, highly refined alcohol. Now, I want to be super clear here. We're not talking about traditional, naturally fermented drinks. No, what we're talking about is something very, very different.
So let's just look at the process. Through repeated distillation, the original product is stripped of pretty much all its natural character. You know, the flavor, the aroma, any nutritional context. What you're left with is nearly pure alcohol, which then has to be made drinkable by adding a bunch of artificial flavorings and sweeteners. Biologically speaking, this stuff behaves less like a beverage and more like a solvent.
In the body's response? Well, it's pretty predictable. The liver has to work overtime, constantly, to process this stuff, and that leads to cumulative damage. This isn't about one single night out, it's about the chronic, daily stress that causes inflammation and messes up the body's natural detox pathways. And from there, the effects just ripple outward, impacting everything from your skin and your digestion to your hormones and energy levels.
Now, this same principle applies to way more than just alcohol. Our second case study broadens the scope to include the enormous world of highly processed foods, which, you guessed it, pose a very similar problem.
I mean, just think about those microwave snacks with an ingredient list you can't even pronounce, or all the artificial flavorings and preservatives in so many packaged goods. These things often get approved because, sure, they don't cause immediate, obvious harm in short-term tests. But here's the really unsettling part. Their long-term effects on our cellular metabolism are a giant question mark. Our bodies evolved over millennia on whole foods, right? Not on lab compounds that have only been around for a few decades.
Okay, so that's the problem. But here's the good news. The solution isn't nearly as complicated as you might think. Let's move on to section 4 and see how this all builds towards a much simpler path forward.
After all of that, this is the most important question, isn't it? If we're removing these chemical stressors, what should we be focusing on instead? For just a moment, let's forget all the confusing diet labels and the extreme trends. The answer is actually beautifully simple. The foundation of good health, the thing that all the consistent medical nutrition science points to, is just eating real, minimally processed foods, things the human body has evolved to recognize and use effectively. And you know what's really cool? If you look at almost any genuinely healthy dietary approach out there, whether it's plant-forward or lower carb, they all share this exact common ground. The universal overlap is always whole foods, fewer artificial additives, and less industrial refinement. That's the simple principle that just cuts through all the noise.
So, how do we actually put this into practice? Well, our final section offers a single, powerful first step. Let's call it the green foundation.
One of the most overlooked but absolutely vital elements in a modern diet is green vegetables. And why is that? Because they are packed with essential minerals like magnesium, which is involved in over 300 biochemical reactions in your body, as well as potassium and calcium. These nutrients support everything from blood pressure to nerve function, all without overwhelming your system with a bunch of sugar.
So if everything else feels overwhelming, here is one simple, non-negotiable rule you can start today. Just put green vegetables on the table. That's it. And then make it a habit to eat a few leaves with every single meal. That one small change can have a profound impact on your digestion, inflammation, and energy over time.
And that really brings us to the core takeaway of this entire explainer. The human body is incredibly resilient, but it can't adapt to substances it never evolved to handle. So the most profound change you can make for your long-term health is to simply stop asking your body to fight a battle it shouldn't have to. Instead, just give it the building blocks it already knows how to use. I mean, what could be simpler than that?